Welcome to Back in Crime, a podcast presented by Texas Crime Travelers. I'm Stewart Fillmore, retired FBI agent.
And I'm Todd Hiles, retired Secret Service agent. In this podcast, we cover cases we worked and some we wish we had.
As lifelong street agents, we were where the rubber met the road.
While the big guys were doing press conferences, we were interviewing the criminals.
And because of that, we can take you inside these cases
and under the crime scene tape.
This is Back in Crime.
Hey, today's crime, we're going to travel back several decades. And this is a fascinating story, Stewart.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this one.
I think a lot of people have no idea that this even happened.
I know, and it's crazy because it involves a really famous celebrity.
I mean, a ton of media attention at the time, but it's quickly become forgotten.
Yeah, it really is weird to me. It should be way more known than it is, but nonetheless, that's great for us.
Exactly. So this crime is planned out for several months. These kidnappers have meetings about this.
Yeah.
They create a notebook where they call it their plan of operation. And
Todd, it's always important when you take on a project that that you have organization and you plan it, right?
Exactly. I mean, they have this binder that's full of detailed plans and drawings how this crime is going to happen. In fact, they've written the scripts for the ransom telephone calls.
Right. To use, yeah.
And they practice reading this script.
Well, you want to make sure you have your lines down, right?
Right. And in fact, they have read and researched the book by the FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover, and it's called Persons in Hiding.
Yeah.
And because they read that book, they think they now have an idea of how the FBI is going to investigate this crime.
Yes, much like in the movie Die Hard, where the terrorists or the kidnappers they're waiting for the FBI because they know their protocol.
And what I find really kind of fascinating about this story is that this was actually planned to happen on a Friday night.
Yeah.
But when they wake up that Friday morning, it's November 22nd, 1963.
And for anyone out there that's maybe heard a couple of our other podcasts, that's a significant date, not only in what we talk about, but in history. It's a very, very significant date.
It's the date that President Kennedy's assassination in Dallas,
exactly.
Texas.
Yes.
And so because of that assassination, that this crime now is going to be put on pause.
Yeah, I mean, that just tells you the importance of the JFK assassination, that even criminals, even kidnappers decided, hey, this is too much. We're gonna put a pause on our crime.
Now, before we get too far into what happened, let's start from the very beginning.
Yeah, because there's some really cool background to this.
And for us to talk about this, we really need to break this down into 7 stages. Our first stage is actually the planning stage. Stage number 2 is the kidnapping. Stage number 3 is the FBI gets involved.
Oh, yeah.
The 4th stage is the kidnappers' demands.
Yeah.
5th stage is how they pay the ransom. 6th stage is the arrest. And 7th, that stage will be talking about the trial.
So was this all these stages, is this something that the kidnappers plotted out? Or is this just, this case has so many elements to it, we got to break it up in stages?
It has so many things in each stage that is just so unique that happened to this case that it's just best to talk about it in that order.
There you go. Let's do it.
All right. So starting in our planning stage, right? So obviously, as a kidnapper, you got to select a target that you are 100% sure that the family can pay a ransom.
Yes. Right.
Because motivation for this kidnapping, it's going to be money.
Oh, well, almost all kidnappings are, right?
Right. So they need money, and their target is going to be Frank Sinatra Jr.
Frank Sinatra Jr. And at that time, let's talk about it. In 1963, Frank Sinatra was, he was just one of the, he was it as far as a celebrity goes.
He was a singer,
the Rat
he was
Pack,
an actor.
this whole thing, movies, music, Las Vegas. Frank Sinatra was the king.
He's a superstar.
Yes.
He's financially wealthy. And again, Junior, I think he's around 19 years old at this time.
Mm-hmm.
He's not really a junior. His middle name is actually Wayne, and his dad's middle name is Albert. But
That's the
Professionally,
stage name. Yes,
professionally he goes by Junior.
Sure.
And for this podcast, we'll refer to him always as Junior.
Yeah.
And the dad as Frank. And again, the kidnappers are certain that Frank's going to pay the ransom.
Sure. Yeah. The thing I've never understood quite about Frank Sinatra, Todd, is, he started off as what was called a crooner, and, that style of music. And, he's very, very popular. But there were other crooners like Dean Martin and Tony Bennett that I think were probably maybe even a little better looking than Frank Sinatra, and I think maybe sounded a little better. But Sinatra had some quality, a coolness about him, something that just that people resonated with. And like I said, he was the top dog in that world.
And I think the kidnappers are gonna pick Junior also because there was all these rumors that Frank was tied in with the wise guys.
Yeah.
That he was tied in with the mob. And I think these kidnappers think that because of that, maybe Frank's not going to bring the police in on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or the fact that, that Frank can handle this on his own.
But I'm not sure that, of course, any criminal maybe is not necessarily that smart. But let's think about for a second, if Sinatra's not going to involve the police, and he is tied up with the mob,
they're going to be involved.
They're going to be involved. So
I think you would
I'm not sure they made that leap.
Yeah, that's true. I think on that one you'd rather fear the mob.
Exactly.
What's going to happen to you?
Yes.
Not that the police are going to catch you. So in this crime, we have 3 amateur criminals, and they're from Los Angeles.
Okay.
But and it's important to mention that these guys really aren't bad guys. Sure, kidnapping is an awful crime, and we have a prison, has high walls around it to keep murderers and kidnappers and robbers in it.
Yeah.
But these guys, this is kind of like a business decision that they're making here.
And I think I mentioned this before, if not on the podcast and some TikTok videos, is, most people that we consider criminals or the people that get locked up for stuff, it's not because they're bad people. It's because they've just made bad decisions. And
Bad
this
choices.
is a great example of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as they're planning this, they're not really talking about this as really kidnapping Junior, as more like they're just going to go pick him up.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
and although they're going to hold him as a hostage, they kind of look at it as they're just going to hang out with Junior.
We'll hang out with Junior. He's a cool guy. We'll have a little fun, and hey, make some money off of it. What could go wrong?
Yeah, they're all buddies. They're hanging out with them until their dad, until Frank pays the ransom. But they don't really think of it as a ransom. They look at it as maybe it's a loan from Frank Sinatra.
Or hey, this is us just getting paid to hang out with Junior for a while, to babysit Junior.
And I think deep down, they have a plan that when they get this ransom money, that they're going to invest it, and they were going to eventually pay Frank Sinatra back. So again, this is just a loan.
Now I didn't know that little angle to it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go. They're doing this out of the goodness of their hearts.
Exactly.
Okay.
So again, the 3 of them. We'll say guy number 1. His name is Barry Keenan.
Okay.
He's 23 years old. And he is the mastermind of this operation.
This was all Keenan's idea. Yeah.
And he is a classmate to Junior, has a sister named Nancy Sinatra.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a classmate of hers. But at age 21, Keenan is already a financial success.
Yes.
He's a stockbroker. He's making good money on investments. He's investing money for other people.
So he's a guy he's an entrepreneurial guy. He's just got ideas flowing all the time.
Exactly. He's driving a brand new Corvette, and he's involved in a car accident. And of course, he ends up with this chronic back pain, and he becomes addicted to pain medication.
Okay. I mean, that can happen. That's not unusual.
And this addiction is going to lead to bankruptcy.
Mm-hmm.
So he draws up this kidnapping plan, but again, it's a business plan.
Yes.
To make money. His thought is that Frank Sinatra was a tough guy.
Yeah.
And that Frank could handle the pressure of his son being kidnapped.
Okay. Yep.
And of course,
that makes sense. Again, it's what I said. Sinatra had this image that, he's this cool, tough guy. That was part of his legend.
And of course, Sinatra has the means that he can easily pay this ransom. And there's also this thought that, Keenan has this thought that he's been to Nancy Sinatra's house when she's had parties there because they're classmates.
Yes.
And he feels that has seen this interaction between Junior and Frank, and he doesn't think they're that close, but he thinks because of this kidnapping, they're going to become closer.
So he's actually also, there's a side benefit of this that he can draw father and son closer together. Man,
exactly.
Keenan is he's a great guy.
Now, later, when all this ends up, Nancy's going to say that she does not know who Keenan is, and she doesn't believe that Keenan's ever been to her house.
Okay.
But he says that he has because she's had parties there. So again, over several months of planning, Keenan has spent endless hours creating this operation, and moreover, how he's going to spend the ransom money.
Yes.
He's got this all planned out.
So, yeah, and he's not talking about that he's going to just blow this money. He wants to invest this. He wants to make this grow, so he can ultimately pay Frank back.
And they're going to get wealthy off of this money that they're going to grow.
Right.
So now guy number 2, his name is Joseph Clyde Amsler. He's the same age as Keenan. In fact, they're classmates. They're kind of lifelong buddies.
Okay.
The two of them. Third guy number 3, is John Irwin.
Yeah.
John Irwin is 42 years old. Irwin knows Keenan because Irwin dated Keenan's mother. And that's
so this is kind of a step dad kind of thing going on.
I believe Keenan and his mother and Irwin, they all 3 go to Mexico on a vacation one time.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of knows who Irwin is. Irwin's an ex-con, but Keenan likes him because he's a tough-talking guy. He's got this raspy voice.
Yes.
He's 6'4".
Okay.
And
he can be the muscle of the operation.
Exactly, and he has the language and the voice to speak to Sinatra during the ransom calls.
Yes. And it would be intimidating, would be convincing.
Right. And so he takes part in this planning stage, but when they actually do the kidnapping, Irwin's not there.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move on to stage 2, the kidnapping stage. So Keenan and Amsler, they're following Junior around, and they're trying to keep track of what he does, and they're trying to develop that pattern of life.
Absolutely, yes.
They want to know when he leaves at night, where he parks his car, what apartment is his, things like that.
Times of day he leaves, and just what his schedule is, what his routine is.
And they, I think in Arizona, Junior has some type of a scheduled performance there.
Yeah.
I think they actually travel to Arizona, maybe to kidnap him there, but something falls through. They don't do it. They come back to Los Angeles. There's another time
because at this time, Junior is trying to start his own career.
Right.
So
he's out and has shows.
Yes.
At this time, I think Keenan is actually calling the record company that Junior works for and would ask, "Hey, where's Junior performing next?" And they would tell him what city or what
because
location.
we want to.
They're promoting him.
They're promoting him, exactly.
So I think another time that Keenan and Amsler, they wait by Junior's apartment, and while they're out there, a nosy neighbor sticks their head out and says, "Hey, I've called the police on you two.
Yeah.
You better get out of here."
Yeah.
So they leave.
And I can just tell you, actually doing surveillance, which I've done many times, I've had the cops called on me as well, although I was doing it, as
legitimately. Yes.
Legitimately.
Yes.
So that's not unusual. I'm not surprised about that.
So this kind of gets us to that Friday, November 22nd, 1963, where Junior has a performance that night in Los Angeles, and they're going to, again, follow him home.
Yeah.
He gets to his apartment.
So they got it all set up.
They've got it all set up.
Yep.
But again, they wake up that morning, they hear on the news, President Kennedy's been assassinated.
Yes.
And really, for the next couple of days, everything sort of shuts down. Of course, his performance that night was canceled.
Sure.
And I think
it just threw everything in disarray.
Right.
Yeah.
And so really, I think at this time, Amsler and Irwin, they sort of back out of this kidnapping plan now. They kind of have seen that this probably isn't working as well, and
maybe they took the assassination as a sign, that we don't need to be in on this.
Exactly.
This is somebody telling us don't do this.
Right. But Keenan, he doesn't give up his business plan.
Okay.
And he's going to learn that Junior is going to be performing in Lake Tahoe in a few days.
Okay. Yeah.
So Keenan and Amsler, they leave sunny and warm Los Angeles, and they head up to Lake Tahoe, Nevada. It's about 500 miles.
Okay.
And Lake Tahoe is a city that sits on the border of California and Nevada.
And this is a couple weeks after the assassination or so?
About 2 weeks.
Okay. Yeah.
And I mentioned that it sits on.
So we're talking December, and Lake Tahoe is going to be.
It's early December.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that there's 2 states, California and Nevada, because of the word interstate.
Yes.
And so whenever we talk about crimes that have this interstate involved,
yes,
it
that brings in a certain federal agency.
And what is that federal agency?
The FBI.
So, Amsler thinks that this is a buddy trip up to the casinos in Lake Tahoe.
Mm-hmm.
So
they've called it off, or Amsler has kind of backed out.
Yeah.
So he's thinking, hey, we're just going to go up to Tahoe.
It's a buddy
out,
trip.
Have a little fun, a little
We're going to go to
trip.
casinos.
Yeah.
We're going to hang out. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah.
So he rides up there with Keenan, and when they pull into Lake Tahoe, Amsler sees a marquee sign that says Junior's performing later that week.
Okay.
And now he realizes he's been duped back into coming to Lake Tahoe, that the kidnapping is back on.
So, hey, I rode up here with him. I got to back my buddy. I got to back his play.
Exactly. So they check into a motel near Junior's, and they go to the casinos. They run up a tab. They have a good time hanging out up there.
Yeah.
And then on the evening of December 8th, 1963, it's snowing, it's sleeting in Lake Tahoe, and Keenan decides he's going to put his business plan into action.
Okay, man. Go for
it. The kidnappers, they're aware that Junior is scheduled to perform at 10 o'clock that Friday night.
That night, yes.
At a club there in Lake Tahoe. But the next day, Junior is actually flying over to begin a Europe.
And Todd, this was at the Harrah's Club in Tahoe, right?
Yes.
Okay. Because I was thinking, there's another famous resort up there called the Cal Neva that I know Frank Sinatra was associated with, and also a lot of other gangsters. JFK and Marilyn Monroe supposedly had a few meetings there, but we're talking about Harrah's and not the Cal Neva.
Okay.
Okay.
And again, the next day, Junior is actually leaving Lake Tahoe to begin a European tour.
Yes.
So, again, Keenan knows this is the night.
It's now or never.
It's now or never.
Yeah.
So, Keenan and Amsler, they go over to the hotel where Junior's staying at, and they go to the front desk, and Keenan is carrying this box, and it looks like it has bottles of wine in there.
Yes.
And they say that, they have a delivery for Junior, and they're told what room Junior's in.
Mm-hmm.
So around 9 o'clock that night, Junior's resting in his room, and he's with a guy by the name of John Foss.
Okay.
Now, Foss plays in Junior's band. Keenan knocks on the door, pretending to be room service, and when the door opens up, Keenan and Amsler both barge in, and they're both armed with pistols.
Right.
They point their pistols. I don't think that they expected Foss to be in there. That kind of took them as a surprise. So they
which is just another lesson in no matter how well you plan something, when you go to execute it, there is always going to be some little hiccup that you didn't anticipate.
Right. And remember, when you do things quickly, make sure you do them correctly.
Yes.
So they quickly tie up Foss. They find some tape in there. They tie him up.
When you have to start improvising like that, that's when it can really turn bad on you quickly.
Right. And Junior kind of looks at this, realizes they have guns, and he does not want Foss to be hurt. So Junior doesn't fight.
Yeah, I'm sure it was very intimidating.
Right.
It was scary.
Junior doesn't fight, and he says, "Hey, I'll go with you guys." Now, while they're in the room tying Foss up, Keenan calls Amsler by name.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's an oops. You don't want to say that. That's an
Yes.
oops. They blindfold Junior, and at gunpoint they take him out to their waiting car.
Yeah.
And Junior kind of goes willing.
I'm because I mean, he's he's a kid still, and I'm sure he was absolutely terrified.
And so they get out there, and they put Junior in the trunk of the car. His mouth is taped shut so that he can't yell for help. And now Keenan realizes that he left his pistol in Junior's room. That's a second oops.
Yes.
Right. So he goes back to the room to get his gun.
Sure.
And he noticed that Foss is about to escape.
Yeah.
So he tells Foss, "Hey, give us 5 minutes before you call the police, or we're going to harm Junior."
Why didn't he just tie him up more securely?
I think he's had a couple oops here now.
Yes.
And again, this was all surprise. I don't think they had to use something that was in the room to tape him up
Yes.
to the floor, and so
Yes.
now I think years later, Keenan is going to give an interview, and he states that at this point he's decided that maybe we should back out of this, and he's just going to drop Junior off down the street.
And just say, hey, no harm, no foul.
Exactly.
Or this was a prank your buddy put us up to.
Right. But it's snowing out, it's cold, and he may pull into a business and it's closed.
Yeah.
And he thinks, well, I can't leave Junior out here in the cold. So, Keenan's back in the driver's seat of the car, and they decide we're headed to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
With Junior, because they have rented a safe house.
Yes.
In Los Angeles that they're going to hold him at. And of course, Foss, he's able to quickly free himself, and he notifies the authorities. Now, before we go any farther in this kidnapping, just a little side note on Foss.
Yeah.
He passed away in January of 2023 at the age of 86.
Okay.
His obituary notes that he was with Junior at the night that Junior was kidnapped. But more than that, Foss had been in the Navy. He was part of the Navy band. He played with numerous musicians and toured. In fact, he played with the Beach Boys. But at some point, Foss returns to his hometown, and he starts a music program at his high school. And over the next several decades, he teaches a whole bunch of teenagers all about music.
Okay.
So pretty interesting how that came out about him.
Yeah, that's kind of a cool story.
Well, so back to our kidnapping. Again, Foss gets out, calls the sheriff's department, and really within 10 minutes of this kidnapping, the law enforcement's involved, and they're already immediately setting up roadblocks, heading out of town, and they're looking for the two kidnappers and Junior. And I think at this time they have a description of a white car.
Okay.
Supposedly.
And really, I don't think, I've only been there one time, but I don't think there's a whole lot of ways out of Lake Tahoe. I mean, because it's basically it's on top of a mountain, and it's kind of just a big bowl in the sky. And, there's only a few ways in and out of there.
Right. So they got these roadblocks set up.
Mm-hmm.
And now, spoiler alert, we're going to learn that the kidnappers get stopped with Junior at one of the roadblocks.
Uh-oh. Okay.
So the guys are listening to the car radio.
Yeah.
And, of course, it's breaking news that Junior was just kidnapped by two guys.
Yes.
And, since there's roadblocks, Keenan is aware that, Foss has probably untied himself.
Yeah.
He's alerted the police.
Yeah.
And they come up with this plan. And I think this is where, again, Junior kind of helps out and says, listen, if we get stopped at a roadblock, they're looking for three people, me and you two.
Yeah.
So they decide right before a roadblock that Amsler is actually going to get out of the car, and he's going to walk around this roadblock. And that Junior says, listen, I'll play along with the cops.
Yeah.
And at some point, actually, Sinatra takes off his ring because it has his initials on it.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, hey, if the law enforcement sees me with this, they're going to know I'm
Yes.
Junior.
Right.
So he gives it to Keenan to hold.
Yes.
And Keenan puts it in his pocket. And so once they get around one of these roadblocks, they're eventually Amsler, who's on foot now through the snow and the cold. How
that is not an easy thing to do.
no, how he gets around all this. I think there's even a story where he falls and actually hits his head and may have knocked himself out for a little bit.
I'm not shocked. It's rugged terrain around Lake Tahoe.
Right. So somehow on foot,
Yeah.
he makes it around. He gets back to the car. But again, Junior says, hey, I'll play this passed out friend drunk in the back seat.
Mm-hmm.
You drive, but Amsler better get in the trunk.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the most of the way back to Los Angeles, Amsler's in the trunk.
Amsler rides in the trunk, and that's like a 7-8 hour drive from Lake Tahoe down to
Well,
Los
it's
Angeles.
longer that night because it's snowing like that.
Amsler. What a lucky loser this guy is. You know, he just goes up thinking we're going on a road trip to Tahoe, hang out, have a little fun, and now he's in the middle of a kidnapping and he's riding in a trunk.
And so they drive all the way throughout the night. They get to Los Angeles. They arrive at the safe house, and they put Junior in a room that has all the windows have been sealed shut.
Yes.
So he can't get out. And again, I know Junior is going to testify later in front of the grand jury, and he's going to say, hey, I'm blindfolded most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I just heard their voices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But he does say, hey, most of that trip back, Amsler's in the trunk.
Yes.
So they drive on to Los Angeles where they have this safe house. That's where they're going to keep Junior. They've kind of nailed the windows shut so he can't get out of a room.
Yes, sure.
And this is where...
And this is all, Keenan has done all this work.
Yeah,
Because
he's pre-rented this house.
Yeah.
This is all part of the operation. And so now we're going to get into stage 3, and this is where the FBI gets involved.
Okay, all right. Bring it on.
So by 9:40 that night, the FBI is going to say within 30 minutes of the kidnapping, the nearest FBI office is up in Reno.
Yes.
And so now they've been involved, and they're brought in on the case, and they're down in Lake Tahoe already.
Sure.
Working the case.
And the main thing they're going to be doing is talking to Foss because you've got a witness to it.
Right.
And so they're going to try to get all the information they can from him, what he saw, what he remembers, tiny little details, that they mention. And I think probably one of the big ones is that one of these guys said a name.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Frank Sinatra is actually in Palm Springs when he gets a telephone call from Junior's manager that says, hey, Junior was just kidnapped.
Yeah.
So Frank actually jumps on a plane and flies up to Reno, but because of the snowstorm, he can't get to Lake Tahoe.
Yeah, I can see that.
So he sits up in a hotel suite in Reno.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the FBI meets with him, and the FBI tells him, hey, the motive for this crime is money. We recommend that you just wait. They're going to call you with the demand.
Yeah.
Go ahead and pay it.
Yes.
But then from there on out, once your son is safely back to you, we're going to track that money.
Yeah.
We're going to find out who these kidnappers are.
Yes.
And again, what's kind of crazy is this is exactly what Keenan believes is going to happen.
Well, he knows the playbook, right? He studied what J. Edgar Hoover himself has written.
Right. So, and again, it's reported that when they're in this hotel room and Sinatra's waiting for this demand, this ransom demand phone call to come through.
Yeah.
Frank has already spoken to the director of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover himself.
I'm not surprised.
And he's also talked to the Attorney General, Bobby Kennedy.
Yes.
Now, I can imagine this
because
is just,
Sinatra, he's big buddies with JFK, the president. Yeah. Well, of course, JFK's dead at this point, but Bobby is still the Attorney General.
Yeah. They know each other. And I can imagine this is just like the movies where, that this room is probably filled with smoke, and you got these 4 or 5 agents standing there, and they're just staring at that telephone.
Waiting for it to ring.
And they're just waiting for it to ring.
Yes.
And so this is going to move us on to the 4th stage. This is when the kidnappers make their demand. But before we get into the kidnappers' demand stage, this part 4.
There's so much to this case. Let's just pick back up
in part 2.
From here, in part 2.
Because
there's so much
again,
to this. What this is when it really gets fun, actually.
What the very first line from the kidnappers' demand stage, this part 4, is going to totally blow this away. And it's probably best that we wait to part
Yes.
2 to say that first line.
Exactly. So let us know what you think so far about this case.
Leave us your comments, and in part 2, we'll pick up at stage 4.
Yeah, we'll see you then. This has been the Back in Crime podcast presented by Texas Crime Travelers Todd Hiles and Stewart Fillmore. We are the executive producers. Grace Hiles is the producer and director. Theme music composed by Eddie Bandus. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and our YouTube channel at Texas Crime Travelers.